Welcome back. The General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, Giwusa, has issued a sharp rebuke of Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's 2025 budget speech, calling it another brutal assault on workers, the unemployed and the poor. Giwusa has also denounced President Cyril Ramaphosa's recent visit to Washington, describing it as a shameful pilgrimage to seek favours from what it calls the world's leading racist imperialist, US President Donald Trump. Joining me now to expand on these concerns is Giwusa President Mametlwe Sebei. Sebei, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. Let's begin first with the budget speech that was presented for the third time this week. You reject as an organization the budget speech, but you also speak about the scrapping of the VAT increase and that's a victory for mass opposition, but the over 61 billion rand revenue shortfall will be dumped on the workers of South Africa through future tax hikes and service cuts. What do you believe is the alternative there?
I mean, that is true. And I think you just have to look at that budget itself, right? Already, the allocation for many services falls short of what actually is going to be required. The allocation for Plaza is far from adequate to restoring the commuter services for which many working class people pay by way of a costly transport. In addition to that, the minister imposed the petrol levy for RAF. Now, that is a way in which they are making ordinary people in a country where, because of the spatial planning of apartheid, many workers stay very far from their workplaces, from the cities, and spend quite a disproportionate fraction of their income on transport. In addition to the fact that they've not changed the income bracket to adjust to inflation, meaning you're going to have ordinary working class and middle class people now being taxed higher on the basis of inflation instead of that reflecting the actual value of what their income amount to. At the same time as this government has left the rich, the big corporations with wealth and super profits that aren't being taxed. There is about 1.5 trillion in cash that is being hoarded by non-financial corporations in this country. Government has left that unscathed. They've also left unchanged the tax cut that they've implemented in the past 3 decades. In 1992, the tax on corporate profits was 52%. Today, it is down to 27%. Now, think about it, Katja. You have a situation wherein a government committed to the service of majority and the entire of the population, charging almost half the tax as a government that was only committed to servicing the minority of the population. And we wonder why nothing works. But we have austerity on public services. That means that these services are gathered to be ineffective and of poor quality.
And any provisions, do you believe, in this budget that really just caters for the benefit of the working class?
I mean, nothing really. It's the justification of the same austerity measures, right? And as I've said, I mean, just to elaborate on what we have proposed by way of alternatives, we say tax most of that cash that is being hoarded, partly to encourage, but also to incentivize big business in investing that in the capital formation, that is in the equipment, in the machinery, in opening new, factories and workplaces in order to create jobs, right? That's what we do. But also, we are proposing the wealth tax on the super rich in this country that are worth trillions of rands, as the majority of South Africans are actually suffering in abject poverty. We have a situation where top 0.1% has more wealth than the 90% of the population, 50% of which is having a negative equity in assets, meaning they have more debts than the assets. Those two wealth need to be taxed. But also, when you look at the mining industry as an example, as well as the banking industry, they are making, profits that are in excess of what they would ordinarily get through normal operations due to commodity booms, in many of these, in many of these sectors like platinum, gold, now and then they experience, a rally in the markets, make, excess profits. The banking industry is wallowing in massive profit because of extortionate interest rates that government and Reserve Bank have imposed, supposedly to contain inflation. None of those profits are deserved. Why can't they be taxed and put at disposal of the fiscus to deliver on the services to alleviate poverty and address the problems of unemployment? Over and above that, we think that economy needs to be taken into public ownership. The state must beneficiate mineral resources in this country. As did, by the way, in the 30s, with ISCO beneficiating iron ore to steel, with Sasol and ESCOM benefiting coal to generate electricity, as well as to obviously produce oil. I mean, we can say what needs to be said to move away from, fossil fuel industry. It's just an example, but there is abundance of mineral resources, many of which are critical in manufacturing of the equipment for renewable energy. There's no reason we can't be leading in a green industrial revolution, for the whole world that we need to combat climate change and to ensure transition to renewables.
I mean, you speak about the economy being taken into public ownership. Do you trust this government to take on the ownership of the economy in the way that you describe? Because, I mean, also in your statement that you put out, you spoke about the collapsing public infrastructure, the deindustrialization and the closure of many factories, and that's leading to a lot of the job losses that we are seeing. If we move more towards a communist way of running our country, do you think we are in a better place and we're better positioned to be able to create more jobs in that sense, as opposed to just enabling the private sector to be the ones to operate and then be the ones to give those jobs and opportunities to workers?
We always make a point, Katla, that it must be nationalization on the basis of the democratic working class control and management. And why is that important? You see, base of capitalism, state ownership is used to underwrite, but also to prop up the profits of the big corporations and monopolies that dominate the economy, right? You see that with ESCOM. Part of the problem with ESCOM is not just a tender-related corruption which makes it and dominate the news in this country. Part of it is that the whole supply chain of ESCOM, from coal mining industry, you have Glencores, you have Authorities that supply over 80% of coal to so-called intensive energy users, to the IPPs. They are swindling ESCOM to the tunes of tens and hundreds of billions. That's the reason that state-owned enterprise is crumbling. And I can go on to Transnet and other state-owned enterprises to give an example on that. We need state ownership that works for the working class people, for society as a whole. And that means making sure that state-owned enterprises are run on the basis of democratically elected committees of the workers, representatives of communities, and other legitimate public interests to ensure that theirs is to perform public service, but also in this case, lead industrialization that is ecologically sustainable, that benefit people of this country, create millions of jobs, raise productive capacity, also to break the stranglehold of imperialism that we see playing itself out in the mockery of the sovereignty of this country that was paid for with the blood of the black working class in the, in the grovelings that we have seen in Washington in the past few days.
Speaking on that, I mean, you described that visit as a shameful pilgrimage that seeks favours from what you call a leading racist imperialist. You don't see any potential benefits for South African workers that could arise from any investment and engagements between South Africa and the US?
I mean, it's like suggesting that do I see any potential benefit, in a relationship between a tick as a parasite and a host, right? Because we are there. Why? Because the reality is you have US and allied Western-based multinational corporations monopolizing the private ownership of the economy of the minerals of the land in this country. and of course engaged in colonial extractivism that has reduced this country to a quarry and a garden, for mining of minerals that are exported as raw materials, and of course fruit and vegetables that feed market, in Europe, in the US, whilst children are dying of hunger and starvation in this country. That is part of the problem. The quarrying of minerals taken as raw without any beneficiation is actually exploitation of jobs and economic development that should be taking place in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, and vast swathes of the country where, because of colonial extractivism, there's only mining with everything west possible that is assumed with mining taking place there, but no meaningful development, no job creations, and we need all of that, those minerals, to be brought into public ownership as other key sectors of the economy. By doing that, by breaking the stranglehold of imperialism, it will be possible to exercise genuine sovereignty. Because what are we subjected to now? You have a situation where somebody make a blatant lie that this country is committing a genocide, right, against people who, by every measure, remains the most privileged racial caste dominating, every structure of power in this country, economically and otherwise. Look at who owns the farms in this country, who makes big part of management of the big corporations in this country, who is most likely to get employed, who owns more wealth. All of that is white people, right? The black face remains the face of poverty, of unemployment, of lack of access to basic services like education, healthcare, all of that. Now, this accusation is all the more insulting that it comes from the government that is complicit in the real genocide against the people of Gaza and Palestine, right? For what? So that this country is blackmailed in order to open doors and to waive the regulations in order to accommodate somebody, this Elon Musk, right, who is using his media empire to promote, public assault and insult against this country, racist narratives, that's such as the genocide, and of course undermining every effort to transition and transform this country away from apartheid that he and the PayPal mafia around him in Washington obviously miss. Because let's remember, this is a man whose parents, his grandparents are, Canadian fascists who came in this country precisely because apartheid had won in 1948.
So in essence, you reckon the president and that delegation should not have taken that trip to the US?
Absolutely not. Look at what happened, right? First and foremost, the Americans even dictate who gets to be part of the delegation. One of them is this NEF, I think that's the name, the golfer, right? You have a bunch of unmandated African right wingers, right? Who have not been voted by anybody, representing the people of this country. Some of them agrees with the very same narratives. They have now used the platform to put legitimacy. And think about any person who has been or would only hear about South Africa, right, from that press conference. You will hear that from among South African delegates, there are people who think murders of farmers in this country is part of deliberate violence directed at Afrikaners as part of a genocidal campaign that the country and the state is being accused of by these right-wing, extremists, both here, but also that are being echoed in the US, right? That's what its implication. If I was this government and you were to have that meeting in the first place, somebody says part of your delegation should include this and that. I would say I'll give him a lift, but certainly he would be part of your delegation, not mine. Why? This is a person that does not share the perspective in terms of where the vast majority of this population want to see this country going. But the fact of the matter is that very visit itself was a problem because from the beginning, right, it was begging of a bilateral with a man and a government that has made up its mind that they are going to be punishing this country. For reasons that we know, solidarity with Palestine, right? Which we can't be traded for anything. Trying to transform the country away from white-dominated society where there was an exclusive ownership, white ownership of the land, of the vast swathes of the economy, as well as the state that was purely and entirely white, right? These people are opposed to all of that. And it was blatant, it was clear from the onset that the meeting and any engagement would be to force concessions on that. We're already seeing that kind of playing out. Government has announced, think about it, a special measures to allow Elon Musk to come in this country. They are effectively condoning the assault and the insult he has been having at the people of this country and the achievement that has been made transforming the state since 1994. This is what he is getting for all of that campaign, for all the racist narratives, and that will only embolden right-wing populists and other extremist elements in this country that are against transformation of the country.
All right, Mametlwe Sebei, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us the insights of your organization with regards to the budget speech.